full of people. Conversations feel shallow. Your thoughts feel too heavy to share. And slowly, without choosing it, you begin to withdraw. This video solves one question. Is your loneliness a weakness, or the inevitable cost of seeing the world too clearly? Intelligence is separation, not privilege. Intelligence is often imagined as an advantage, a kind of invisible currency that grants access to better choices, better conversations, and a better life. But this belief belongs to those who have never carried it deeply enough to feel its weight. In reality, intelligence does not integrate a person into the world. It quietly removes them from it. It does not raise you above others in celebration, but pulls you aside in observation. The mind that perceives too much cannot remain fully immersed in the surface of things. The first separation begins internally. As intelligence sharpens, the individual starts to notice the mechanical nature of human behavior. Reactions repeat themselves. Emotions follow patterns. Conversations circle the same safe topics, the same borrowed opinions, the same rehearsed moral positions. What once felt spontaneous now appears scripted. This awareness creates a fracture between participation and perception. While others are living inside the moment, the intelligent mind stands slightly outside it, watching, analyzing, measuring. Presence becomes divided, and this division is a seed of loneliness. This separation deepens when intelligence encounters social reality. Society does not reward clarity, it rewards agreement. It does not honor truth, it honors harmony. Most relationships are built not on understanding but on mutual avoidance of discomfort. People bond by sharing illusions, not by dismantling them. Intelligence, however, has a corrosive effect on illusion. It questions what others accept. It doubts what others defend. And in doing so, it becomes unsettling. The intelligent individual senses this tension early on and learns, often unconsciously, to restrain their depth in order to remain tolerable. Over time, this restraint becomes exhausting. To think deeply while speaking shallowly is a form of psychological dissonance. The intelligent person must either dilute their thoughts or isolate them. Most choose isolation, not because they despise others, but because they refuse to betray their inner reality. Intelligence, then, does not create arrogance. It creates withdrawal. It teaches the individual that authenticity comes at the cost of connection. Another layer of separation emerges through emotional experience. Intelligence does not blunt emotion, it intensifies it. The intelligent mind does not simply feel sadness, disappointment, or fear. It understands their causes, their trajectories, their inevitability. This awareness strips comfort from emotion. Suffering becomes more precise, less vague, harder to escape. Where others distract themselves, the intelligent mind reflects. Where others forget, it remembers. This depth of emotional processing isolates the individual further, as shared emotional shortcuts no longer work. Even joy becomes complicated. Simple pleasures lose their innocence when they are understood too well. Entertainment reveals its manipulative structures. Ambition reveals its emptiness. Social rituals reveal their performative nature. The world begins to feel thin, not because it lacks substance, but because intelligence has pierced its surface too many times. What remains is a quieter, colder, more solitary relationship with existence. This is why intelligence rarely feels like a gift from the inside. It feels like exile. The intelligent individual did not choose to see more. Seeing happened to them. And once perception expands, it cannot be reversed. One cannot unsee motive, patterns, or contradictions. One cannot return to comfortable ignorance without losing integrity. This irreversible awareness separates the intelligent from the collective dream in which most people live. The tragedy is that intelligence is often mistaken for superiority by those who observe it from the outside. In truth, it is a form of vulnerability. The intelligent individual is more exposed to reality, less protected by illusion, more aware of life fragility and meaninglessness. They do not float above suffering, they sink into it. And because suffering is not easily shared without simplification, they carry it alone. Thus, intelligence does not grant privilege. It enforces distance. It redraws the boundary between the individual and the world, not in favor of comfort, but in favor of truth. It demands solitude not as a preference, but as a consequence. The intelligent individual becomes a witness rather than a participant, a thinker rather than a believer, a solitary consciousness navigating a world built for those who do not look too closely while the intelligent feel misunderstood. To be misunderstood is not a social accident for the intelligent individual. It is a structural condition of their existence. Misunderstanding does not arise because they fail to explain themselves clearly, but because clarity itself threatens the psychological comfort of others. Most people do not approach conversation as an exchange of understanding. They approach it as a confirmation of their existing beliefs, emotions, and identities. Listening, for them, is selective. They hear what reassures them and ignore what unsettles them. The intelligent mind quickly senses this limitation. It recognizes that language is not used primarily to reveal truth, but to maintain emotional equilibrium. Words are chosen to preserve harmony, to avoid tension, to signal belonging. In such an environment, depth becomes dangerous. Nuance is perceived as complication. Honesty is perceived as criticism. Intelligence, which naturally moves toward complexity, disrupts this fragile balance. The result is a subtle but persistent alienation. Misunderstanding begins with speed. The intelligent mind processes ideas rapidly, often seeing connections and implications before others have finished grasping the surface. When these insights are expressed, they appear abrupt, excessive, or disconnected to those who have not followed the same internal path. What feels like a natural conclusion to the intelligent individual feels like a leap to everyone else. This gap creates suspicion. The speaker is perceived as overthinking, exaggerating, or intentionally obscure, even when they are being precise. There is also the problem of emotional mismatch. Intelligence often comes with emotional restraint, not because feeling is absent, but because it is examined. The intelligent individual does not react impulsively. They observe their own emotions as they arise. To others, this can feel cold or detached. In emotionally driven environments, intensity is mistaken for sincerity. Calmness is mistaken for indifference. The intelligent individual's composure is therefore misread as a lack of empathy, even when it is a result of deeper emotional awareness. Another source of misunderstanding lies in the intelligent individual's refusal to simplify reality for social comfort. Most people prefer clear villains, simple narratives, and moral certainty. Intelligence resists this. It sees contradictions within virtue and weakness within strength. It recognizes that human behavior is rarely driven by a single motive. When such observations are voiced, they destabilize the moral frameworks people rely on to feel secure. Instead of engaging with the complexity, many respond by dismissing the observer. It is easier to label someone as cynical or pessimistic than to confront the fragility of one's own beliefs. Misunderstanding also emerges from projection. People tend to interpret others through the lens of their own inner world. Those who avoid introspection assume others do the same. Those who fear depth suspect it in others. When faced with intelligence, many unconsciously attribute negative motives to it. Insight becomes arrogance. Silence becomes judgment. Independence becomes superiority. These projections serve a defensive purpose. They protect the individual from confronting the possibility that their understanding of the world is incomplete. For the intelligent individual, this constant misinterpretation produces a quiet exhaustion. Every attempt to communicate requires translation, reduction, and careful calibration. Thoughts must be softened, trimmed, or disguised to avoid resistance. Over time, this effort begins to feel futile. Why speak fully if understanding is unlikely? Why reveal complexity if it will only be flattened or distorted? Silence becomes not a withdrawal from others, but a protection of inner coherence. This withdrawal, however, deepens the misunderstanding. Silence is rarely interpreted as thoughtfulness. It is seen as aloofness, secrecy, or lack of interest. The intelligent individual becomes increasingly invisible, not because they lack presence, but because they refuse to perform emotional signals they do not genuinely feel. Their inner life grows richer while their social image becomes poorer. What makes this condition especially isolating is that misunderstanding often comes from those closest to the intelligent individual. Familiarity does not guarantee comprehension. In fact, intimacy can intensify misunderstanding when others expect emotional simplicity or predictable responses. When the intelligent individual does not conform to these expectations, disappointment follows. The gap between inner reality and external perception widens, creating a loneliness that cannot be explained without reinforcing the very misunderstanding that caused it. Thus, the intelligent individual learns an uncomfortable truth. To be deeply understood is not a common human experience. It is a rare alignment of minds, not a social norm. Most interactions are functional, not existential. Recognizing this does not eliminate the desire for understanding, but it does strip it of illusion. The intelligent individual stops expecting depth when none can be offered, and begins to accept misunderstanding as a natural consequence of seeing beyond the surface. Loneliness is a price of seeing clearly. Loneliness, in its most profound form, does not originate from the absence of people, but from the presence of insight. It emerges when perception penetrates beyond appearances and refuses to be satisfied with comforting illusions. For the intelligent individual, loneliness is not a sudden misfortune but a gradual realization. As understanding deepens, the world begins to feel increasingly distant, not because it has changed, but because it has been seen too clearly to remain familiar. To see clearly is to recognize that much of human interaction is driven by unconscious need rather than conscious choice. People seek validation, reassurance, distraction, and escape, often mistaking these impulses for connection. Intelligence unmasks these motives. It reveals how affection is exchanged for security, how agreement is offered for acceptance, how identity is constructed to avoid uncertainty. Once these mechanisms are understood, participation becomes strained. The intelligent individual cannot fully surrender to interactions built on self-deception without feeling internally divided. This clarity produces a subtle estrangement. Conversations that once felt meaningful now feel repetitive. Social rituals reveal themselves as maintenance rather than expression. Words are spoken not to communicate truth, but to preserve stability. The intelligent mind begins to feel like a visitor in ordinary life, present but not absorbed, attentive but detached. Loneliness arises not because others are absent, but because shared reality no longer feels shared. Seeing clearly also means confronting aspects of existence that others instinctively avoid. Mortality, meaninglessness, suffering, and impermanence are not abstract ideas for the intelligent individual. They are lived awarenesses. While many people shield themselves from these truths through routine and optimism, the intelligent mind dwells on them. This dwelling deepens thought but narrows companionship. Few are willing to accompany someone into reflections that destabilize comfort. As a result, the intelligent individual carries their heaviest thoughts alone. Emotional life follows the same pattern. Intelligence does not simplify emotion, it complicates it. Feelings are examined rather than merely experienced. Desire is questioned. Attachment is analyzed. Hope is measured against probability. This reflective stance creates emotional distance even in close relationships. While others seek emotional fusion, the intelligent individual seeks emotional understanding. The mismatch leads to isolation, not because love is absent, but because it is processed differently. Loneliness intensifies when the intelligent individual realizes that clarity is irreversible. Once illusions are dismantled, they cannot be sincerely rebuilt. One cannot unknow what has been understood. One cannot return to naive participation without sacrificing authenticity. This creates a sense of permanent separation from the collective mindset. The world continues to function on assumptions that no longer feel convincing, and the intelligent individual must navigate this world without the comfort of shared belief. There is also a moral loneliness that accompanies clarity. Seeing clearly often means recognizing uncomfortable truths about human nature. Altruism is mixed with self-interest. Morality is influenced by convenience. Virtue is often performative. These insights do not lead to cynicism by choice, but by observation. Yet expressing them risks social rejection. Remaining silent preserves peace but deepens isolation. The intelligent individual stands at the threshold between honesty and belonging, knowing that full honesty often leads to solitude. This solitude is not always dramatic. It is quiet, persistent, and internal. It shows itself in the feeling that no one truly knows you, not because you hide deliberately, but because revealing yourself will require others to confront realities they prefer to avoid. Loneliness becomes a background condition of awareness, a constant companion rather than an episodic pain. Yet this loneliness is not without meaning. It is the price paid for refusing to live unconsciously. It is the cost of refusing to trade truth for comfort. The intelligent individual does not suffer loneliness because they lack social skill or emotional warmth, but because they have crossed a psychological threshold. They have seen too much to belong easily and understood too deeply to pretend otherwise. Clarity demands distance, and distance, over time, solidifies into solitude that is not chosen, but endured as a consequence of seeing the world as it is, turning solitude into psychological power. Solitude, when first encountered, feels like a wound. It arrives as absence, as quiet, as a slow realization that one's inner world has fewer points of contact with others than expected. For the intelligent individual, the solitude often begins as something unwanted, even feared. It appears to confirm the suspicion of being disconnected, misunderstood, or out of place. Yet over time, solitude reveals its deeper function. It is not merely an emotional state, but a psychological condition capable of transformation. The critical shift occurs when solitude is no longer interpreted as rejection, but as freedom. Once the intelligent individual stops measuring their worth through social reflection, a profound internal reorientation takes place. Energy that was once spent translating thoughts, managing impressions, and seeking recognition is withdrawn inward. This withdrawal is not defeat, it is consolidation. The mind begins to operate without interruption, without distortion, without the constant pressure to conform. In solitude, thought regains its depth. Without the need to simplify for others, ideas are allowed to unfold fully. Contradictions can be examined without haste. Uncomfortable truths can be explored without defense. This sustained internal dialogue sharpens perception and strengthens intellectual autonomy. The intelligent individual no longer borrows meaning from consensus. Meaning is constructed privately, deliberately, and with greater precision. Emotional life also changes within solitude. Freed from the need for constant affirmation, emotions lose their volatility. Feelings are no longer amplified by social comparison or external validation. They become quieter, steadier, more comprehensible. The intelligent individual learns to observe emotional fluctuations without being governed by them. This emotional self-regulation is the foundation of psychological power. One who can remain composed in isolation will not be easily destabilized in company. Solitude also dissolves the fear of being alone, which is one of the most powerful tools of social control. Many people compromise their values, silence their thoughts, or adopt beliefs they do not hold simply to avoid isolation. The intelligent individual who has embraced solitude is no longer vulnerable to this pressure. They do not need to agree to belong. They do not need to perform to be accepted. Their independence becomes unassailable, and with it comes a quiet authority. This authority is not loud or domineering. It does not announce itself. It manifests as calm, restraint, and clarity. Others may sense it without understanding its source. The intelligent individual speaks less, but when they do, their words carry weight. They are not rushed to respond, not eager to impress, not desperate to be heard. This measured presence subtly alters power dynamics. Those who are uncertain feel exposed around those who are self-contained. Solitude also refines judgment. removed from collective emotion, the intelligent individual gains a clearer view of human behavior. Patterns become easier to detect. Motivations become more transparent. Without emotional entanglement, manipulation loses its effectiveness. The solitary mind is harder to deceive because it does not rely on external affirmation. It sees people not as they present themselves, but as they reveal themselves over time. Perhaps most importantly, solitude restores ownership of time. In a world that constantly demands attention, solitude allows the intelligent individual to choose where their focus rests. Time is no longer fragmented by obligation or distraction. It becomes a resource to be invested in understanding, creation, and self-mastery. This disciplined use of time compounds inner strength, producing resilience that is invisible but formidable. The transformation of solitude into power does not eliminate loneliness entirely. The intelligent individual may still feel the absence of deep companionship, but this absence no longer defines them. It no longer weakens them. Instead, it sharpens them. Solitude becomes a space of alignment, where inner values and outward actions no longer conflict. In this state, the intelligent individual no longer seeks power through dominance or recognition. Their power lies in self-sufficiency, in psychological independence, in the ability to remain whole without external support. They are not easily influenced, not easily provoked, not easily controlled. Their solitude has become their strength, not because it isolates them from the world, but because it has freed them from the need to be validated by it.